I put my phone in my bag over here. Thank you, Noel. Thank you for having me. Thank you all for coming. My name is Jeff, and I am not a Luddite. For those of you who don't know, Luddites were these people in the early 1800s who were opposed to all technological progress and industry, so they would break into factories and destroy machines. We have neo-Luddites now, who are people who are also opposed to technological progress and the automation of everything. And I, as part of doing the digital fast, I think people sometimes assume that I align myself with this kind of hardline position against all technology. And so I want to introduce myself by saying I am a filmmaker, I teach film, I provide 24/7 tech support to my wife. I'm very comfortable with, and I use technology as part of my work and my job and my creative work. And as a parent, I love the fact that I can take hundreds of thousands of pictures of my children. These are my kids. This is Leo. That's a flask. This is Alex. And despite the fact that I am, tech savvy and comfortable with technology, I've always had sort of a skepticism about new technology and this kind of immediate embrace of whatever comes out. And so I was kind of a late adopter, relatively, I'm sure, compared to some people in this room, to smartphones. But when Leo was born, I decided to get a smartphone because I wanted to be able to take pictures of him all the time. And for a while, that's what I did. I used my phone for that. I kind of made guidelines for myself. I said, I'm not going to get consumed by this. I'm not going to use it for email. I'm not going to use it for texting. I'm just going to use it for taking pictures. That didn't last too long. I was enticed and seduced by my phone, as we all are. And so spending days, weeks, months with a baby, often alone, without other adults around, you go to your phone for community, for entertainment, for news, to feel like there's a world out there, because babies are amazing, and it's a wonderful experience to have a young child, but it can be boring at times too. They're not very good conversationalists, and your phone is nice. So I started to think a lot about my relationship to my phone, and I had a lot of time to sit and reflect about it. And I would have these moments where, Leo would be playing happily in the sand, and I would take my phone out and just start scrolling, and then sort of time lost meaning. You kind of go in there, you're in your feed, and it's like it doesn't end, and you look up and it's like, oh, Leo's not where he was. And that sort of seemed like a problematic relationship to me. So I started to think a lot about this, and I learned that there were a lot of books about this. A lot of other people have been thinking and talking about this, and the one that I found that I really loved was this book, Present Shock, by Douglas Rushkoff, who some of you might know. He's a media scholar and a media guru. And what he says in Present Shock is that basically we live in this constant state of emergency, or this openness to emergency interruption, where we're never in a present moment, regardless of how important whatever moment we're in. You're having a romantic dinner with somebody, you're with your child, you're in a meeting, you're driving your car, anything that you would define as kind of an important primary reality. We live in this state where we're always willing and okay being interrupted. That's what he says. And he said before we all carried kind of the internet around with us and these communication devices around with us, that was a state that was really only occupied by people with jobs like 911 operators, air traffic controllers. He says we all live like that now. And it's not good for our nervous system. And we live in this kind of distracted present. And so a good quote from him here is, he says, our society has reoriented itself to the present moment. It's not just a speeding up, it's a diminishment of everything that isn't happening right now and the onslaught of everything that is. So one concept that he talks about is this idea of narrative collapse, which is we don't have stories as much as we just have a series of snapshot moments. I think the best way to understand this is to think about your feed on your phone, right? The way we consume news now is Trump said this, Kanye did this, your cousin just posted this picture of their cat, your kid is doing this, and it's like, those are all just equal stories, right? There's not a timeline. I mean, there is a timeline, but there's not an arc to that. It's just this endless series of events that are hitting you. What does that do to your sort of conception of the world? And he says it's not all bad, right? Rushkoff is not a hardline anti-technologist, and I don't align myself that way either. He says that a lot of good stuff has come about as a result of our devices and our social networks. We have instant reporting on things. People can work remotely, which is great. We have a greater sense of activism and more buy-in by people. And businesses and retail can have real-time response to things. But we also see this kind of content becoming more shallow and less deep, and there being more information, but less kind of analysis and less of a narrative to things. So we see texting replacing email, Twitter replacing blogs. Kids seem to have a harder time following linear arguments, and we have this kind of reality TV storytelling replacing narrative structure. We have a reality TV star running for president right now. I don't know that that's a coincidence. He talks about this idea of digiphrenia, which this is something that I really connected to. He talks about drone pilots as a very extreme example of this. But a drone pilot, you're sitting in a room somewhere in Utah or Virginia, and you are controlling drones halfway around the world that are potentially dropping bombs or conducting surveillance on people. And it's this separation of yourself into two parts, right? You have your physical self, and then you have what your brain is actually doing, and it causes this great disorientation among people, and we all experience that too. I really like this New Yorker cover. I don't know how well you can see this, but it's these kids are trick-or-treating, and all their parents are kind of waiting for them, sort of looking at their phones, and that's digiphrenia too, right? There's the reality, and this is where this connects to reality, I think. There's the reality of what is physically going on, but then there's what your brain is doing, and in many ways, that's really your reality, right? I mean, I don't know, I'm embarrassed or I'm ashamed to admit how often I will be on my phone in my car and realize, I don't remember the last 2 miles that I just drove. That's digiphrenia, right? Thank goodness I didn't notice that because I hit a deer or something. But that would be kind of shocking you back into a moment. So I put all of that stuff together, and reading this book, Present Shock, and thinking about all of this, and as a film professor, I thought I would love to know what 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds think about this stuff. I'd love to turn this into a class because, as someone in their 40s, there is a tendency to say, well, maybe I'm just aging out of this technology, and maybe I just don't get it. So what do millennials, what do kind of college students think about this? And so I engaged the Bentley, where I work, Bentley University campus with this, and I thought I'll try this out as a class. So I made these posters and I hung them up, and I was nervous that no one would be interested in this subject. I thought, these guys are such digital natives, they've grown up with this stuff, they don't think about it the way I do because I grew up without it and I noticed when it came into my life. So I was very gratified when the class filled up and I had a group of students who were into this. So we used Present Shock as our textbook, and this was a full semester long class, but the centerpiece of the class was the digital fast. So let me talk to you guys about that. These were the rules of the digital fast. And I introduced this to my students on the first class, the first day of class. Even though, class started in September, we weren't going to do the digital fast until November because I really wanted to kind of ramp up to it and get them prepared for it. But I introduced it to them on the first day. So I laid this out for them. We're going to spend a weekend without this stuff, okay? So starting on Friday at 5:30 and going all the way until Sunday at 5:30, you guys are not going to have access to any screens. So no phones, nothing that has the internet on it, computers, laptops, tablets, no TV, no video games. Just to be a jerk, I said no movies either. You can't even go to the movie theater. No screens of any kind, right? And the reaction in the room, there was this palpable sense of panic. Great anxiety, great panic, and also from quite a few, I had 17 students in the class, from a number of them, there was also this, you're kidding, right? We're not really doing this, or when you say I can't use my phone, you just mean I can't use Snapchat, right? I can still use my phone, or I can still text and call. There was a lot of that kind of like hair splitting. And I said, no, if we're gonna do this, you're putting it in a drawer and you're not using it. And that really hit them. And I really thought when we came back for the next class that there would be like 3 kids left in the class, that they were gonna drop, and nobody dropped. And I was very pleased with how seriously they took it. And part of them taking it seriously was really freaking out about it. But that meant that they were really considering doing it. So a couple reactions from my students. I'm expecting to experience true boredom. I think a lot of them kind of just went to the worst case scenario. It's like, well, I'm just gonna sit in my dorm and look at my alarm clock and just count the minutes until 5:30 on Sunday. Some of them had a better attitude about it. I'm excited to get back to the past and immerse myself in my surroundings. I must say that, hearing a 20-year-old talk about 7 years ago as the past makes you feel old. This might be my last chance to go off the grid in our increasingly technological world. That's pretty melodramatic, but I think these are all legitimate reactions that they had. So one of the things we did as we started to ramp up to this was we talked a lot about what are our digital habits, what are the things that are going to be difficult about this, and what are our habits and how can we prepare. So I had my students we surveyed and had them write about this. So some of their big habits. They talk to their parents every day. That's not true of all of them, but as compared to when I was in college, I just feel like I noticed this. They get out of class and they call their parents, or their parents text them to ask them how their quiz went or whatever. That was a big one. And their parents were more upset about this than they were. Keeping FOMO at bay, fear of missing out. That's a big one. A lot of them were panicked about that. It's like, well, how am I going to know what the really good stuff that's happening this weekend is? They watch a lot of Netflix. It's really weird to me. They all watch Friends and Gilmore Girls, these shows from when I was in high school. Netflix and chill means something else, but they do that too. In the moment planning, right? There is no let's have dinner at 6 o'clock on Saturday. And I'm making broad generalizations here. I know that some college students do this, but it's kind of this evolving plan, right? It's like who's involved, who's not involved. And this is certainly true of people who are not in college as well. I do this also. They document their life, proving I was there, this happened, almost going back to that if a tree falls in the woods and no one tweets about it, does it make a sound? This idea that if something really great is happening and you don't document it and share it, it didn't really happen. And passing the time when bored. I did the same thing for myself. For me, the stuff that was going to be hard and the things that I really use my devices for is being reachable by my family and my work. I am constantly creating and playing Spotify playlists. I commute, so listening to podcasts like WTF is a big deal for me. The ability to capture magic moments with my children, that was a big one. Validation of the awesomeness of my life via social media, right? That's going back to that thing when you're with your kid. It's like I'm feeling a little depressed. I'm feeling kind of lonely. I need some likes right now. The ability to stay up on things. Filling in empty moments and real-time planning. So as we kind of ramped up to the weekend, we started preparing for this. And so some things I had them do were I told them how to, I said, let people know you're not going to be available. These are ways to avoid failing, right? If you're going to do this. Let people know you're doing it. Let people know how to reach you if they need to. Have emergency plans. Decide what you're literally going to do with your devices. I found it useful to say I'm going to put this in a drawer and close the drawer, and I'm not going to. Some of them wanted to carry their devices on them, and that's just you're opening the door to temptation and failure when you do that. Take care of your business beforehand. Allow for analog logistics. We were talking about this beforehand. You might have to use maps. You might have to make hard schedules with people. You might need a watch. Maybe you'll listen to records. And then I tried to put sort of a more positive spin on it to get people sort of excited about doing this. Try thinking about it as freedom instead of prison, right? A lot of them were thinking like this is just going to be so oppressive, but think about what you can do. So going back to Rushkoff, by way of sort of launching them off onto the digital fast, I reminded them about what Rushkoff says about this stuff. So some key points from the book that I kind of condensed into these tagline statements here as things that I wanted them to think about and explore while they were doing the digital fast, because this was an academic exercise as well. The first one is step away from the feed, right? This is an opportunity to just back away from that endless onslaught of news and entertainment and posts. It's all going to be there at 5:30 on Sunday when you come back. And I think there's this fear that if you don't constantly read it, you're going to miss something really important. And that leads us to this feeling of being overwhelmed and exhausted and distracted all the time. You don't read it when you're asleep, right? And the world is basically there when you wake up. So if you just expand that out for another 48 hours, there's a pretty good chance you're not going to miss anything. And if something really important happened, you'd see people like running down the street screaming, right? There is still a way of getting news and information that doesn't come from your feed. We can't live on machine time. He talks about this, how machines are always on. For machines, it's always now. We are not machines, and yet we try to keep up with our phone as if we are. This is probably debatable. Some people would probably argue that multitasking is possible, but Rushkoff says multitasking is a myth. So I asked my students to consider that and to, at least for this weekend, practice doing one thing at a time. Practice letting yourself be bored, letting your mind wander, daydreaming. I can't remember the last time I just kind of sat there and spaced out without pulling my phone out. That's when I used to get ideas, right? That time before you had that thing in your pocket to distract you. And so I said, carry a little notebook with you, write down your ideas, or just think. Rushkoff talks about the singularity, which is this very dark idea that artificial intelligence is going to become smarter than human intelligence and humans will become obsolete. So as a happy thought, I asked them to reflect on that over the course of the weekend. But basically how this connects is when you're not using your device, it's an opportunity to think about how comfortable you are with your device. What do you really miss? And what is it nice to not have to do? There's this, and I mentioned this at the beginning, there's this constant embrace of, okay, the new iPhone is out, we're all getting it, the new tablet, the new thing, and everybody is talking about the next wave being this embedded devices, right? Stuff that's going to be implanted. Google Glass is kind of I think a crude version of this, but that's going to get improved. How comfortable are you with having things in your body? I mean, I think that there's this idea that maybe that's a future that we're never going to get to, but this weekend was an opportunity for them to step back and say, where are we now? Where are we going? It's a chance to control your data, right? Rushkoff talks a lot about this. What happens to all of that data, all that video, those pictures, everything that you share with the world? Who's using that and for what? For this weekend anyway, you don't have to worry about big data and what's happening to it. And then you can connect to natural rhythms. Pay attention to the light, the weather, landscapes. Navigate the way people used to by sort of looking at the landscape and looking at things. Try navigating without your GPS. So those were some of the kind of big picture things that we talked about as we went into the digital fast. And here's how they did. I had 17 students in the class, and I did this as well. My wife did it. Our 2 young children did it. They had no say in the matter. So 17 students, 4 of them were, and I take them at their word here, right? I mean, we were all in this together. I think they were very honest and straightforward. It wasn't like I was grading them on their success or failure. It was more about documenting the experience through writing. So 4 of them were 100% successful. 11 of them had some minor lapses. So the majority of them had a few times where they checked a map, they looked something up online, they did some homework, online, and 2 just completely failed. And I would say the 2 who failed were sort of disappointing to me because I read their reflection papers afterwards, and they basically admitted to not even trying. At 6 o'clock on Friday, they were like watching Netflix and listening to music and texting all at the same time. And then we had an embedded Boston Globe reporter who was kind of following some of my students during that weekend, and she did as bad as the worst students. She was, I think, early 30s, so kind of in between me and my students, And, she was listening to the Serial podcast on Friday night, and she just said she felt too lonely and disconnected, and so she quickly went back to the devices. But it was kind of good for her article because she sort of confessed that in the article. So a few student reactions. These are from their kind of after papers. I went into Harvard Square with my boyfriend and felt great anxiety about losing him. What if we got separated and I couldn't find him again? I felt almost dependent like a child, which is interesting because when I was a child, this technology wasn't present. I thought that was very articulate and honest, and a real thing. Joey said, the sleep I got during the digital fast is some of the best sleep I've gotten in a long time. I kind of experienced that too, right? You're not as frantic as you're falling asleep, and you don't reach for your device when you wake up. And that's that idea of connecting back to natural rhythms. And then Title said, I started to panic about not knowing what to do with myself if I didn't have any activities planned out. The thought of free time with absolutely nothing to do scared me immensely. I also found that very telling and honest, the idea that free time is somehow something to be feared, that this is a negative and something to be avoided. That's really interesting. So for myself personally, so I did this. I managed to get a group of maybe 15 or so friends and acquaintances to sort of join us on the digital fast, which was nice because we had on Saturday of the digital fast, we had a digital fast party where we had people bring records and we listened to records and we talked, right? And drank. And that was great, right? Because all those things are analog, right? Alcohol is analog. And it was really nice, and what I learned from that is that if you're going to do this, do stuff that you don't normally do, right? Somebody, I read their sticker said, go camping. That's the way to succeed with this, I think. If you just do your normal routine, you're gonna notice every time you're not using your phone. But if you kind of step out of that, it's a chance to maybe enjoy it. So some things that I noticed just kind of doing the digital fast that were positive. It was really nice to not have to keep track of responding to things, right? There is initially this panic that you are going to miss something important from work or a friend, or there's going to be some emergency. But after a while, you just kind of let go of having to get back to people, and it's really nice. I felt calmer in the morning and at night. I had to find things to do other than watch TV and look at my phone in the evening, and I liked that. It was nice to know how to get places. Without GPS, I found myself paying more attention to my surroundings, and I felt just kind of generally less twitchy and anxious.
So you succeeded.
I succeeded. Yes. Yeah. Me and my family succeeded, but it was hard too. There were difficult things, and so this was kind of my lasting memory from doing the digital fast myself. Saturday morning, remember we did this from Friday evening to Sunday evening. Saturday morning, I was in the car, and I was hardcore about this. I didn't let myself listen to even the radio in the car, so I was really kind of like media free. So I was sitting in the car at a red light, and I just got so angry that I had to sit there at the red light, look at this stupid city out my window. I couldn't pick up my phone and check in on things. What is it, 45 seconds? How long is a red light? It made me so frustrated and angry, and that's when I sort of noticed that maybe I'm addicted, And the takeaway from that wasn't I should stop doing this, but this might be indicative of a problematic relationship, that I can't handle my own thoughts in my own head for 45 seconds. The other thing that I found amusing in retrospect was at about 5:25 on Friday, as we were getting ready to do the digital fast, and I was, I'd already turned off all my devices, and the last thing was my phone. I actually had the thought that did not occur to me as ironic at the time, oh, I'm going to take a picture of myself turning off my phone, share it, and then see all the comments that I get on it. And it took me a couple minutes to realize that was completely not the point. All right, so wrapping this up, big picture conclusions that my class and I drew. We all agreed on this. This is more complicated than we thought it was going to be. I think I went into this feeling way more preachy and opinionated about this than I do after doing it. I thought about the digital fast as making a point that, this stuff is bad for you and we should use it less. And I came away from it, having experienced it with my kids and my students and myself, that it's more about asking a question about your relationship to technology and your devices. Everybody's is different. I'm sure some people here have healthy relationships and some people probably have unhealthy relationships, right? So I think doing the digital fast is about examining what those relationships are, paying attention to what was really hard about it and what was really nice about it, and what can you do with that knowledge now. So let's see, let me make sure I don't want to say anything else about that. Oh, and I think I also came away from it with this appreciation that our devices are, and I think Louis C.K. does a really great bit on this, our devices are these miraculous, powerful tools. I mean, they really are. I think we take them for granted. I think if you think about them more that way, you potentially will appreciate them more and maybe use them a little bit less. Kind of think about them as tools. And when we're done with tools, we put them away, right? But we never seem to put that particular tool away. So I'm not going to get into the Boston Globe article. I'll just wrap up by saying that this seems to be a trend that's happening some places. There's this place called Camp Grounded, which is a summer camp for adults. I think it's really interesting. These are kind of their rules on a sign here. No digital technology, but they also align this with no work talk either. So you go to this thing, it's like a 48-hour summer camp, or it might be a week. You're not allowed to talk about work. You're not allowed to bring digital technology. You can't network. You can't talk about your age. So they kind of expand this out to these other aspects of life. And I think that's really interesting. You are seeing these things start to pop up. Device-free drinks, digital detox nights where people go and they kind of check their phones at the door, or they're not allowed to use their phones. You get kicked out for getting your phone out. You're seeing this as almost like a luxury thing that's being offered places where it's a high-end hotel that advertises the fact that they don't offer wireless, that you are not able to connect there. And then you see these apps, which this is, in some ways it's ridiculous, but in other ways I get it. There's an app called Pause, which will pause your phone for a certain period of time, right? You still have your phone, but it will, you can say, I'm gonna meditate or just relax for 15 minutes, and it will pause your phone. So I am considering doing this here, maybe as a summer challenge to Portsmouth or Kittery area. So I will leave you with that idea. How would this do in the Seacoast area? Thank you.
So now is the juicy part, which makes Creative Mornings so much fun, which is when we get to have dialogue and talk to Jeff and ask questions and talk amongst ourselves. So if anyone has a question, feel free. Yeah.
So Jeff, what really strikes me is so much of the language, whether it's Rushkoff, talks about this being being in the present, and yet it's in direct opposition to actually being present.
Yes.
When you're at the red light, frustrated, being present is to embrace what's around you, and it's just such a contradiction. Of course, my mindfulness app, my Headspace is on my phone.
Right.
Meditation timers are on my phone.
Yeah.
It's a little contradiction, but that's how I get present.
That's right. And he talks about that in the book, and I think it's, there's different kinds of presence, and I think Digiphrenia illustrates that pretty well. There is the kind of present that we all think of as sort of this Zen state of mind where we're in the moment and we're connecting to our surroundings. But if you're in multiple presents at once, that's not mindfulness, that's not Zen, that's the opposite of that, right? You're kind of spreading yourself out. And think about all your avatars and all your different identities, right? Those are all different yous. It gets very confusing, and again, not great for your sort of peace of mind.
Have you ever thought about switching to a flip phone or something more simple?
I have. I go back and forth on that stuff all the time. I think the conclusions I personally drew are that I ultimately, even though I have a problematic relationship with it, I like having a smartphone and I like this technology. It's kind of like food or anything else. It's like, if you decide you're unhealthy or overweight, are you going to stop eating delicious stuff, or are you just going to eat a little bit less of it? And I think it's about moderation. Because I don't know. I don't want to flip phone. Yeah.
Did you choose 5:30 Friday to 5:30 Sunday so you could still watch Game of Thrones?
I don't think it was during the Game of Thrones season, but I did somewhat coincidentally schedule it on a Patriots bye week. And I think that's okay. I think it's okay to sort of figure out when it's conducive for you and when it's going to be more difficult for you. Yeah.
I just think it's interesting how much preparation you had to do for it. I'm kind of saying, like, in studying the guidelines, I just remember being in college, it was my finals week, my computer died, and I lost my phone. And so all of a sudden, I was just in panic mode. And it wasn't panic because, like, oh, crap, I can't do my finals. It was like, well, how am I going to meet someone for lunch?
Yeah.
And it's just like looking out the window, like yelling, like, hey! And that, it makes me think, like, oh God, like, I could have used the preparation before losing it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and yet, I think for most of us, if it's not forced on you, you would never choose to do this unless someone made you. But yeah, I mean, I came away from it with a lot more sympathy for the world that I and my students live in, because you can do this for yourself, but the world goes on, and people are going to send you messages that you normally respond to, and you not responding to them can be seen as rude or unprofessional, right? So I get that, and I certainly wouldn't tell people you have to do this. But the one thing I didn't mention in my conclusion is I would suggest that everyone can find at least one weekend in their year to do this, and that if you can't, you should ask yourself what that says about your relationship to your job, your family, the natural world, all of this stuff, that you can never unplug, right? It's not about a permanent unplugging. It's about taking this step back and examining it. So,
I'm like fully addicted to my phone, so I don't feel like I could ever. It feels like beyond reach to uncouple. But a couple of years ago made a pledge that any vacations I took overseas, I would leave my phone at home. And I've been having the best vacations ever as a result. So like my wife has her phone for emergencies, but there's none of that stuff that I'm consumed with every day, and it's an amazing experience. I'd encourage people to try that if you haven't.
Yeah, and I think vacations are a natural time to do something like this, because you would theoretically like to not be connected, but you probably just feel like you have to. So are there some things you can put in place where you can be reachable if you absolutely need to be, but you can basically be offline?
I've tried to make small steps in my own life, like leaving my phone out of my bedroom so that I don't feel tempted first thing in the morning to pick it up, or if I'm playing with my kids, I leave it across the room, so if it rings, I can grab it, but otherwise I'm not checking whatever. Did the digital fast have anybody coming out saying, okay, well that was a nightmare, but now I feel like I can leave things behind for a couple hours or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the questions I asked my students was, do you feel like there are any kind of permanent changes you might be making? And you have to take them at their word for this. But I think there were some where they truly did sort of notice that, like this kid Joey, who seemed to have a really good experience with it. It really struck him how when he was together in a room with all of the people that he wanted to be together with, that somehow they were still all connecting outward. It was like 8 people, 8 phones, 8 little separate realities. And he said that when he's together with all the people he wants to be with, he's just going to keep his phone in his pocket. Of course, that's 1 down, 7 to go, right? But that was his takeaway from that.
I know that you were saying you might do something locally for a larger thing, but in general, not as part of being a leader of something like this, do you intend to do this on a regular basis for yourself to stay grounded with this, or is this kind of like, I learned something and now I'm just gonna kind of move forward? That's
a great question. Yeah, actually, so my wife and our kids are going camping this weekend, and we're gonna try doing this because it's been too long. I mean, we've done it one other time since this was back in 2014 that we did this. And so we're gonna try it. I mean, I think it's a great, for me anyway, I feel like I'd like to do this at least twice a year. Doesn't seem extreme. Feels like you can kind of plan it around a vacation or something. So yes, I would say I would love to continue doing this.
What's the plan to do with photography when you're going out with your family? Because it's the one thing that I'm obsessed with.
Yeah.
Part of the reason, as you stated, I take pictures of my kids every day.
Yep.
They're going to grow up. having a time lapse of every day of their entire
Yes,
life.
that's right.
But when you go camping, are you going to bring a camera?
I'm just gonna accept that we're not gonna capture that particular weekend. And I totally relate to what you're saying, because for me, that's one of the big senses of panic, right? It's like, what if Alex does something just completely amazing? It's like, yeah, but I have 30,000 pictures of Alex doing amazing things, And there are real cameras too. That's right. Yeah.
You can borrow one.
Yeah. And again, it's not about being a Luddite, but it was fun to do the record player party. I have a Super 8 film camera. It's fun to go back and play with analog technology and kind of remember the more tactile way that technology was.
This kind of brought up a thought. I'm just curious, everyone is really documenting their children and posting it all over the place, and I kind of wonder, I've heard some recent reports about what, kids finally are like, please stop posting photos of me on Facebook. And I just wonder if people have thoughts about, this is like the most documented generation ever. We take pictures of them every day, and, what does this do to them and their psyche? And
yeah, I worry about that. Yeah, I don't know if anybody has response to that.
Circling back to just before that comment, I think you'll find that you'll remember those memories better than snapping seconds.
Yes.
I mean,
And that's something I found.
In your mind.
Sorry.
Yeah, that imprint. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's something I found in the digital. It is. I don't want to make it sound like it's just this completely idyllic way to live and that we should all just, put our phones in drawers permanently. But it is nice to just kind of go, right now I'm doing this. I'm walking with my son, and I'm not thinking about when we can stop and get a coffee so he can occupy himself and I can check in on things. It's kind of like you're constantly planning the next 2 minutes ahead so you can take a little digital break. You are more present, and I think something different is happening to your brain.
I have a question, but I will say about the photograph is my son had an event and all the families were taking photographs and I was the only one that didn't take a photograph. And he noted that and he said, why didn't you take a picture of me? And I said, because I wanted to be the one to remember it. I didn't tell him I forgot my phone in the car. But honestly, it made an impact with him. He said, that's a good answer.
Yeah.
I'm the only one that saw it real time. Everybody else saw it behind the phone. But at any rate, I want to know, going back to your students, are you doing this again in your class, or what's the reaction, what's the buzz on campus for you as a professor now after this?
I really want to do this class again. So far I've only taught it once because I teach film classes. This is a little bit outside of my area, but I would love to make this an annual class, to do this once a year and to do the digital fast annually. That has not happened yet, but yeah, we got a lot of positive press for it and a lot of attention. I was a little disappointed because one of the assignments that I also gave my students was to engage the campus community with this and make a marketing campaign and get more people to do it voluntarily. That did not go very well. Some of them got some friends and family to do it, but I would love to see that. I would love to get the school more on board with it and have like
Freshman orientation.
well, that's not going to happen. But have some kind of like outdoor events going on, or like a band or something like that, where it's kind of like there's stuff you can do if you're doing the digital fast, almost like it's make it more enticing.
Say in the next 7 years, do you have an idea what you think the next generation is going to be like once these people have absolutely no concept of what it's like to not have a phone for a little bit in their lives? Is this going to disappear completely?
Is the idea of this?
Yeah, is the idea of being able to disconnect.
Yeah, well, our kids are 6 and 4, so they're that generation that you're talking about. And I don't know. Those of you who have small children have probably noticed they'll like take a book and try to like swipe the pages. My kids don't get like I was watching the NBA playoffs the other day, and they don't get that you can't just watch that anytime you want. You can, not to get it into the weeds on this, but they don't understand this, that things aren't on demand for everything. That not everything is just there waiting for you. Not everything is a sort of screen consumable piece of content. I don't know. I'm curious and a little scared to see how they grow up. But in some ways, technology has always been, there's always been new technology, there's always been the latest thing that people are afraid of, and I think so far humanity is still around, you know, so I'm ultimately positive about it, but I think you just have to be moderate in your use, you know.
Yeah, and I think the cool thing to remember, technology has been around the whole time, but we are very concerned because that's the profession we're in.
Yep.
But there's a whole bunch of other people in this world who work really hard at teaching meditation, to doing yoga, to having retreats, and so that's not going to go anywhere.
Yep.
We also have a big world
Yes.
where there's a lot of indigenous tribes still, and people teaching each other that, so I think that we have to understand that there is us, and then there's other people. So I don't think we should be worried.
That's a great point. I'm really glad you brought that up, that this is specific to a certain, you know, class and places in the world, and other places in the world would kill to have access to this technology, right? So it is important to keep it in context. And that's why I try not to be preachy or judgmental about this personally. It's really just about, this is something I engage my students in and I engage other people in, but it's really ultimately about your own personal relationship to this stuff. And if you feel sort of twitchy and jittery and anxious, maybe you should try it, you know?
Well, and about the around the world thing, I have a friend who does sort of humanitarian work in other countries, and she has been spending a lot of time in Africa and working with this Maasai warrior tribe, and they have cell phones. They live in huts, and they don't have running water, and they don't have electricity, but they have cell phones, and they email her and can stay connected when she comes back to the States and stuff. So it is actually a lot, I think, more pervasive. We think, oh, well, other countries don't have this, but they kind of do.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, I have a 7-year-old and a 9-year-old girl, and we have been complete and total hypocrites with our children in many ways, and one of them is they don't have screens at all. We don't have a television in our home. Occasionally they will watch a YouTube video of like Sesame Street account or something. But what's really neat is my mother-in-law gave them iPads because she thought, well, that's just ludicrous that they're doing this. We thought that would fly. I don't know how she thought that. But when we talked to the girls about it, I asked my oldest, all right, so what do you do all day? You draw. Yeah, do you want to stop drawing? No. You read. Do you want to stop reading? No. And so we kind of went through a few of her things, and I said, okay, so what in that list do you want to give up so you can watch something on a screen? And she really couldn't give me an answer, and accepted very well that she wasn't going to keep the iPhone or the iPad. And I think that that's kind of the same thing for me when I saw your subject. I was like, what am I giving up to sit and scroll?
That's a good
And what do I get out of it? Not nearly what I get out of it, because I have a lot of other hobbies that I thoroughly enjoy. Yet I do find myself scrolling when I could do those hobbies. So.
Yeah, and I mean, I am not I'm not in marketing, and I'm not a social media person professionally, and so I get that some people can't really opt out the way I'm suggesting. But one thing I tried after doing this that I've sort of slipped away from a little bit is like I would give myself an hour of concentrated social media time a day. You know, where it's like I can take it, I can enjoy it. It's kind of like the difference between planning to watch like your favorite thing at night and kind of making an event out of it, and just having it on all day, and it sort of gives you this kind of gross feeling, you know?
I recently installed a Chrome plugin on my desktop to hide my newsfeed from my Facebook, and also I uninstalled Facebook from my phone, not the Messenger app or the Groups app. And so I just eliminated the newsfeed itself, and it, like, the very next day I felt better. And I think it's because, like, I have all these friends on Facebook that I want to know what's going on in their lives, and I like seeing pictures of their little kids and whatever, but they're also sharing all these memes and stuff that's not from them, and it's not from anyone I know, it's just out there floating around. So I think that, like, you know, maybe one thing we could all do to make everybody's life better is to just only share stuff that's real, you know, not these pictures with like a few words on it that are like some inspirational quote, but like a picture of your actual life is so much more interesting to me than some random thing you just passed along. You know?
Yeah, I think that's a great point too, because there is a lot of nuance to this, right? It's not this either or thing where it's like you're either using your phone or you're not using your phone. It's like, how are you using it? How do you want to conduct yourself? I think that's a great point.
On that same topic, how how much have you thought about, or how much do you think the developers of apps and technology need to consider that same type of usage?
It's a great question. It's not a particular area of expertise for me. I mean, I know that there's a lot of talk now about Facebook's sort of political agenda and what Facebook does with our data. I think that the big picture answer to that is we as consumers and users of this stuff are kind of woefully uneducated on what, I think, if you asked a Facebook user what Facebook is for and you asked a Facebook employee what Facebook is for, they would say very different things, right? So I think it's really good to be educated about how that stuff works. And I guess to answer your question, yeah, I would hope that there's responsibility there, but it's hard to know that.
I also was thinking about when you said you spent the night listening to records, drinking, hanging out without your devices. Really where it becomes problematic is the mobility of it. So I just had this image in my head that you would never sit with your friends like with a camera like in their face the whole night while you're taking phone calls on a rotary phone, typing thoughts on a typewriter, sending telegrams via telegraph, while listening to an album on headphones. You just wouldn't do that. But the mobility of it allows like this sneaky, kind of relationship with the rest of the world while you're supposedly present.
Well, that's something I noticed when I got a smartphone for the first time was I don't have a watch. I haven't worn a watch in a long time. And something as simple as just like, what time is it, can lead down a 20-minute rabbit hole, and it's like, I didn't even check the time,
I always think about, we all have our own little realities and the things we like, and how does that affect a sense of community? Because if I can get everything I want on demand, what do I care about what someone else wants? I feel like it's little bubbles.
Yep, it's very much, it's called an iPhone, right? It's very catered to you and your needs. And, I look at the way these things are advertised, and it's like, you deserve everything that you want, If we all get everything that we want, some people are going to be getting something they don't want,
I think this project happened after your class probably, but I just looked it up. It's Eric Pickersville, I think, and he took a bunch of photos. And this is kind of like the telegram and whatever. It would be weird to have all these things in front of you. And this photographer, he removed the cell phones.
Oh, I've seen that, yeah.
Yeah, and it's similar to the trick-or-treat photo. And it is just really interesting because you have a couple like lying in bed, and they're both looking at their phones, or the whole family at the dinner, or they're just looking at their palms.
Yep.
It's really interesting when you remove it.
Yeah.
And you're like, this is such a ridiculous scenario, and we're all doing it all the time.
I saw a great ad campaign I think it was basically just to try to get kids to go outside and experience nature, and it's similar to that. It's like somebody and they're like, I think it's like a you see a kid doing this, and then you see that what they're holding is like a frog, or you see like just like someone swiping and they're like, I don't know, doing something with a leaf or something. But it's like taking the motion and the imagery and the sort of posture and replacing it with the natural world. I thought that was a neat campaign.
Before we wrap up, for Jeff and also my own curiosity, how many people here would be willing to do a weekend digital fast and try to do the Seacoast edition?
Well, that's impressive.
And I would love, even if you did it on the summer, but I was thinking like all of us have connections in the high schools, UNH even, like we could really try to do something that would be really cool.
That's
and
great.
I love the idea of like, hey, everyone go to Prescott Park. Like different ideas of where people could gather. And I mean, Jeff is available. Your Twitter account is very minimal,
it is.
You're going to say, but maybe after this, I know it's contradictory, but that's a way to get in touch.
It's really not, yeah.
And I would love to see us do something, and Creative Mornings certainly could be someone
That's
that
awesome.
support that and sponsor that. And if you guys, if we reached out to you, if you would help us spread the word if we actually did something like that. So it's a great show of hands. Thank you for that.
That's really encouraging. I'm happy to see that.
Yeah, me too. So we're almost at time, but I wanted to just say two quick things. One is I've noticed some of you taking pictures of his screen, writing notes. What you might not know is that Jeff's entire talk and his presentation we post on our Portsmouth Creative Mornings site. After our awesome videographers edit the footage that they've been taking, you are going to have a chance to go back, listen to it, forward it to friends, see the presentation, get the details on, okay, what are the rules for the fast, share it with people. So that's one thing and you can also see any of the past 4 months of talks that we've done to date. Last month's talk on risk, previous talk on that was on change. All of those are available to you in the global community. So that's one thing I wanted to make sure to point out. And then the second thing is I wanted to introduce next month's topic, which is actually on, the theme is broken. And our speaker is actually here. Bob Fernald is here. He's going to be talking next month on June 17th. So that will be here really quickly. It's only in 3 weeks. Bob is a ultra marathon open water swimmer and has done things like the English Channel and Manhattan and found swimming late in his career, sort of as a new thing, but he's going to be talking about adversity and how you face adversity and what your response is to that. So mark your calendars for June 17th.
That's way more impressive than doing a digital fast.
So, thank you all for coming. Really, really, really appreciate it. PKX mugs are going to be for sale we've got more than what's out, so if you want a mug and you want to support what we're doing here, we appreciate that as well. Have a great long weekend. Thank you all for making the time.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.